the September MTA Board meeting. We're down a few board members today, and I'll be chairing the meeting while Chairman Loda is out of town celebrating his 30th wedding anniversary. Let's start with members of the public who have signed up to speak. Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Chairman, we have 20 public speakers today. Before we get started, I'd like to remind the public speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, that we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware of the clock up front, warning you, and the warning you will get from me and the clock reminding you that you have 30 seconds left to speak. The first speaker today is Jason Pinero, followed by Nia Kai.
Good morning, Mr. Ellis. Good morning, Freddie, Ronnie, and the rest of the board members. It is good to be the first one to speak. And I'm going to speak in favor of the ferry service that's going to be provided between Stuyvesant Cove in Manhattan and Williamsburg. I hope that it works. If it works, let's make it permanent. Regarding Long Island Railroad, I'm very hopeful to hear Philip Ang's presentation about Long Island Forward. Phil, you know that I have my support all the way to the end. And regarding Long Island Railroad, I'm in support of all procurements presented. I hope that you guys move forward with it. And I want to congratulate Joe Lola on his wedding anniversary. I hope that he's having fun as much as we do, having fun being here. And listen to every single of you that are our voice. And you guys have all of my support. So that's all I have to say for this month.
Thank you. Our next public speaker is Nia Kai, followed by Brian Padira.
Good morning. I am a commuter who uses the Staten Island Express bus. My previous route was the X2, which served commuters along the Highland Boulevard corridor along the east shore of Staten Island and East Midtown Manhattan. Highland Boulevard served 5 of the 10 most ridden express buses, where Highland Boulevard has sustained 80% of the cuts. My bus was completely eliminated, and the others have been merged. I am here today to ask you on behalf of myself and the thousands of other commuters that we need our service restored as soon as possible. It was the only East Midtown Express bus that traveled along this route. I would like to take this opportunity to tell you that the MTA's Fast Forward plan failed on meeting the goals of reliability, travel time, frequency, and network simplicity. Buses are often missing. We are experiencing numerous missing scheduled buses at times and are waiting 25 to 40 minutes. That's not even guaranteed we're getting a seat when the buses finally arrive. Travel time has increased, not decreased, due to the added number of stops. For example, the old X2 had 20 stops covering 4 miles, while its replacement, the SIM-10, has 10 miles and 25 stops. Due to the elimination of the X2 and the merging of these 3 buses, we have severe overcrowding. Commuters were promised a frequency of every 4 to 6 minutes during rush hour, but in reality, the bus frequency is every 10 to 15 minutes, resulting, again, in severe overcrowding. The longer walking distances to and from bus stops, transferring to other buses and trains, are resulting in longer commutes, especially for the disabled, who lost their bus stops. The east side of Midtown Manhattan Highland Boulevard corridor passengers no longer have direct service. The X2 serviced about 6,000 daily riders, in which 75% utilize Madison and Lexington Avenues. So just to summarize, commuters are now facing 90 minutes and longer in total daily. Fifth Avenue is a traffic disaster, causing extensive delays. Less available seats on the bus due to overcrowding, also causing delays in onboarding and offboarding. And finally, Staten Island is the only borough without a subway system that has the highest daily commuting cost at $13 a day and the least reliable and least efficient commuter system. Thank you for your time.
Our next public speaker is Brian Padira, followed by Sergeant Joe Duran.
Good morning. My name is Brian Padua. I, too, am also fighting for a Staten Island Express bus. I just want you to see what happened. You guys, our old route had 27 stops, and the new route has 25. It doesn't look like much has been done. A lot of buses went up in routes. When you guys cut bus stops, you guys are not coming out and looking. And here's a picture of two-way street, no sidewalk on either side. And by eliminating a bus stop, you're making people walk out in the middle of traffic. Okay? By combining your routes and no longer having a Madison bus up on Highland Boulevard, these are the lines you guys have created. Not me, you guys. I heard somebody on Monday say that Staten Island asked for this. We didn't ask for these long lines, whether you're midtown, whether you're downtown. Okay? Whether you're on the bus or off the bus. We have massive amounts of long lines that now you guys are creating barricades for us. Okay, with the combined routes of the 2 and the 9 together, that were 9, the X9 used to be a 6th Avenue bus and the X2 used to be a Madison. By combining them, you guys promised 4 to 5 minute windows. So why am I waiting around 10 minutes and 19 minutes for buses? Okay, the old route, the X2, took me 1 hour and 16 minutes. It was really about 50 minutes. The new route is 1 hour and 25 minutes. But if I go locally and save $117 a month, I'm only spending 3 more minutes on the ground. So the choice is yours. Do you want me to keep spending the $117 extra on the express bus, or do you want me to tell my whole entire community to start going locally? Because it's not worth it anymore, okay? Shoving every bus, 18 to 21 routes down 5th Avenue causes bus bunching. You've made a double bus lane, but your own bus drivers are not in it. They're taking up both bus lanes. It's absurd. I want my old route back. Please return the X2, the Madison bus, that had 4.7 miles. Get rid of the Sim 10 that has 9.2 miles. It's too long, and it's taking me too much time to get home and to get to work. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Sergeant Joe Duran, followed by H.B. Schroer.
Wait a button. It just starts? Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the board, union members, and citizens. My name is Staff Sergeant Joe Duran, United States Marine Corps. I've been in the Marine Corps since 1999. I was going to come up here and give you some statistics, but I think it's just better to tell you a story, things that I tell my Marines. I do know that 12,000 veterans live below the poverty level in New York. I also know that 12,000 veterans are also college students in New York, so you've got all different types of situations. But I'll just get into the story. One of the things that I did as a Marine Corps and stationed here in Garden City, Newburgh, Cincinnati, New Orleans, 29 Palms, one of the things that we did was called funeral honors. And what that is that we give honors, we give the flag to the widow or the family members of the deceased Marines. And we did hundreds of them. And I would tell the Marines before I would leave, before I left the unit, say, I probably won't see some of y'all again until we have to do honors, either for you or for me. So now, give each other the honor and respect and help each other now while we're alive. Now, I heard about, and the way I'm going to connect this is that I heard about the veterans and how much they pay for the tickets. And this is a chance for us to honor them while they're here, while they're working, while they're going to school. If you bring down the price for that, it's not just a few pennies on the dollar for the tickets. Those pennies go to buy milk, food, eggs, things that we need to live. A little bit here will go a long way everywhere else. It's not asking for the world. It's just asking for y'all to give honor and respect to the veterans while we're still alive. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is H.P. Schroeder, followed by James Barnlier.
Good morning. My name is H.P. Schroeder. I'm a 92-year-old World War II veteran and live in Manhattan. Over a year ago, we proposed making available a discounted MetroCard at a senior price. For the record, let me read from David Keller, your acting director of MTA's Management and Budget Department. It's a letter to me of September 13th. It is fiscally, irresponsible for the MTA to consider reducing fares for veterans without properly funding it. I can't dispute you have financial problems, possibly due to prior boards. However, it was not caused by veterans. You thank us by charging us full fare, an average of $40,000 during our lifetime. I ask you, is that fair? The mayor and Speaker Corey Johnson recognize their moral obligation to college veterans by establishing on January 1st a discounted MetroCard. The city has done its part. When will the governor and this body do yours? The governor has the authority to pass 2 bills which allow for a 50% discount to all veterans. The public supports this. Explain to them why you cannot afford to dedicate 2 to 3 cents from every fare when congestive pricing is estimated to produce $1.5 billion in extra income. My fellow veterans have sacrificed years of their lives to fight for you. We ask you to examine your conscience and fight for us. While Mr. Keller says it's physically irresponsible for you to give a veteran's discount, it's unconscionable for you not to. Rest assured, we are not going away.
Thank you. Our next speaker is James Barnleer, followed by Miriam Fisher. And I'd like to remind the public that we afford everybody 2 minutes in fairness and to do this in a timely manner.
Right, I appreciate the disrespecting the last name. It's Barnaker. This is to Mr. Buford. Congratulations on, yes. What? Byfoot, sorry. Not Buford. Wow. That was the retort to the person who pronounced my last name wrong. So that was for you. So, Mr. Byford, congratulations on your appointment. Congratulations to everything. I'm fighting for more access for disabled on the subways. I know you've done it in London, and know you've done it in Ottawa. Is there anything that you can do, because I am a current myself of the half-fare card, like everybody else. I know there's not much that you can do in that frame of mind, but with the fact that the MTA has such poor standards for accessibility, at least along my line, the F line, right? There's bare minimum of maybe, I can count like 15 different subways and accessibility lines. Is there anything you can do? And if there is, I'd like to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Miriam Fisher, followed by Eric Dinowitz.
Hello, I'm Miriam Fisher. I'm a commuter, mass transit user. I worked for many years at International Center for the Disabled, and I myself have what would be called an invisible disability, bad back, bad knees. I compliment President Byford on his Fast Forward plan, which has acknowledged the needs of people with disabilities and appointing an accessibility commissioner. Chief, I think the issue now is a concern about funding. There have been many proposals, congestion pricing, which would reduce gridlock, pollution, and maybe help the buses go faster because they're slower than ever, for what I've been reading. Another concern relating to issues of accessibility is the F train, which was just mentioned. One of my close by stops is 23rd on the F and the M line, which is closed for months for renovation. There are 4 consecutive stations in a row that are not accessible: 8th Avenue, 7th Avenue, 6th Avenue, and Broadway. And 6th Avenue is also near the Sellis Manor, which is an agency that's a residence for people who have visual impairments and blind. It's also a link to the PATH train. It's 4 stations in a row, and I think the plan was that there would not be more than 2 stations in a row that would lack accessibility. Talking about issues of accessibility, seats. Seats have been eliminated on the E-train. Some stations no longer have seats while you're waiting. Some of the platforms, 53rd and Lex, 59th, and probably many others that I'm not aware of. But the first time I saw folding seats was on the Paris subways.
If you could please
and let me
summarize your
propose
remarks.
that where the new world can learn from accessibility issues in the old world. That's another need for people with disabilities. Port Authority eliminated benches, but they also have folding seats attached to the walls.
Ma'am, if you could please summarize your remarks. We have a number of public speakers.
Okay, so the issues of accessibility and seats, also accommodating people with diverse needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public speaker is Eric Dinowitz, followed by Assemblywoman Natalia Fernandez.
Good morning, everyone. I think we're hearing a theme about advocating for people with disabilities. My name is Eric Dinowitz, and I am a special education teacher in the Northwest Bronx. As you know, in April, you set aside $300 million for improvements for train stations to make them accessible to people with disabilities. We are here today to ask that some of that money be allocated to the Mosholu Parkway, Jerome Avenue 4 train to make it fully accessible for people with disabilities. Over the past 6 weeks, a broad coalition of elected leaders, community institutions, and advocates gathered 2,000 signatures, which I have right here, in support of this elevator at Mosholu Parkway and Jerome Avenue on the 4 train. 2.7 million riders per year use this station to go to a broad range of places, including doctor's appointments at Montefiore Hospital and North Central Bronx Hospital. They go shopping in the Jerome Gun Hill Bid. They live in nearby Tracy Towers and Scott Towers, or they attend Clinton High School and the Bronx High School of Science. Importantly, this 2.7 million riders per year does not include those for whom our subway system is not accessible. For far too long, would-be strap hangers have been left out of what should be the greatest transit system in the nation, if not the world. People with disabilities and new parents with strollers like myself, and seniors with walkers or canes, people with shopping carts, athletes, people with invisible disabilities have been left out of our system. So I stand before you today on behalf of my 2,000 neighbors in the Northwest Bronx who signed these petitions, on behalf of 2 major hospitals that serve thousands of patients and who employ thousands of doctors, nurses, administrative staff, on behalf of hundreds of local and small businesses, on behalf of countless people with disabilities in this area who want to travel independently around our city, for the simple request to install elevators at the Mosholu Parkway 4 train station. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public speaker is Assemblywoman Natalia Fernandez, followed by State Senator Jamal Bailey.
Time starting. Good morning, members of the board and everyone here. Quickly following off with what District Leader Dinowitz has said, I share the exact same sentiments. I do have the Mosholu 4 station in my district, and it is a dire need to have an elevator there. But more importantly, what I'm here for is regarding the Penn Access station plan, in which MTA is about to hopefully add 4 new train stations to the east side of the Bronx along the Amtrak line. I've recently become aware that Amtrak is holding this project because of disputes on whether who is going to fix the Pelham Bay Bridge, which is along their lines. And from what I've been told, the dispute is that they're saying the MTA in New York State should pay for the repairs if we want this project to move forward. I came here to express urgency that this project with the 4 stations is absolutely needed for the Bronx. It's no secret that the Bronx is a transit desert with not many train stations or Metro North stops. So to have these 4 additional stops would drastically improve transportation opportunities and abilities for Bronx residents, particularly in the Morris Park Station, which falls in my district. This would greatly improve the neighborhood, create it to be a medical hub on the other side, not only from Montefiore and North Central Bronx for the 4 station, but for Jacobi Hospital and Einstein Hospital. To have that access point there would bring jobs to the district. It would bring new visitors to the district, to the area, and also give members in my district the ability to travel outside of Morris Park in the Bronx to other jobs, to other opportunities, and just all over the city. So I ask and urge Amtrak to please consider giving your fair share and fixing the bridge so we can move forward with this project and give the Bronx the transportation access that it truly deserves. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have State Senator Jamal Bailey, followed by Assemblyman Jeffrey Dinowitz.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank the board for convening today. I would like to thank the MTA for also meeting at the Borough President's office on a couple of occasions to discuss some issues that are very important to us in the Bronx related to transit. First and most importantly, the East Side Access Project that Assemblyman Fernandez referenced. I represent the great community of Co-op City, and a very unique community, and Co-op City is vital. So I echo the sentiments that Ms. Fernandez said in terms of making sure Amtrak does pay their fair share so that residents of Co-op City no longer have to commute to Manhattan and take a bus to a train to possibly another bus. That transportation access would be vital for them. Speaking of Co-op City, once again, the bus situation in terms of the revamping the buses, I strongly continue to urge you to take a look at the bus routes in Co-op City. There are 5 distinct sections in that housing development, and some of them are underserved at the present time, and I would strongly, again, encourage you to take a strong look at making sure that sections 1 through 5 have equal access to the buses. And finally, to piggyback off what Mr. Eric Dinowitz was saying, I also represent the Meshulah Parkway, Bedford Park area, and the fact that there still is no elevator at the 4 train is a travesty. I went to the Bronx High School of Science, and at that time, whether you wanted to go to Bedford Park or the Meshulah Parkway station, if you had a temporary disability, if you sprained your ankle playing basketball, or if you were just a senior citizen that was tired, you did not have that ability, that access to be able to take an elevator. I strongly urge the MTA to include the Meshulah Parkway 4 train station due to its proximity to 2 major hospitals, 2 amazing high schools, and a community of people who have been waiting for this for quite some time. I understand the fiscal constraints, but we can no longer look to put profits over people, and I look forward to your continued cooperation. Thank you all.
Thank you. Next, Assemblyman Jeffrey Dinowitz, followed by Maria Torres.
Good morning. I want to start by thanking Mr. Byford and the Fast Forward Plan. I look forward to seeing the results as soon as possible. I want to also acknowledge Jean Hill, who's the president of Community Board 7, and Tracy Towers Tenants, who, along with Eric Dinowitz, co-chaired this petition drive on behalf of our community to ask for an accessible subway station at Montefiore Parkway and Jerome Avenue on the 4 line. And they, along with Assemblymember Fernandez, Senator Bailey, and many community organizations, work together because of the urgent need to have this station made accessible. There are only 23% of the stations in the city which are accessible, but the percentage in our community is less than that. And on the number 4 line, the last station that is accessible, as far as I know, is Fordham Road. That means there are 4 stations beyond it: Kingsbridge, Bedford Park, Montefiore Parkway, and Woodlawn, that are not accessible. But this particular station is especially important because it's just a couple of blocks from 2 major hospitals: Montefiore, the largest employer in the Bronx, and North Central Bronx, not to mention all the other things that previously stated. And this station is also a little different than a lot of the other stations in the Bronx. Most stations in the Bronx, people use it in the morning and they come back in the evening, but you don't have the reverse taking place. At this station, you have a very large number of people coming into the station in the morning because of the fact that you have the two hospitals there and that it's in the middle of one of the biggest business districts in the Bronx. So you have commuters, both AM and PM, coming in both directions. It's heavily used. There's a tremendous need. The type of people who use it, there is a significant number of people who have various disabilities who would like to use it. So many people who can't use it. And I would say that if you're going to add 5 stations, which I applaud you for, that it's a top priority that this be one of those 5. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Maria Torres, followed by Tasha Lebaras.
Good morning. My name is Maria Torres. I'm here to represent Bronx Community Board 2 and to speak in favor of the Metro North Hunts Point Avenue station. I believe some previous speakers had also spoken in favor of this. In regards to the Hunts Point station, we look forward to working with the MTA in planning all the things that go around the station, but also just having the station itself would allow our residents access, as previous speakers have spoken, access to employment opportunities not just in Manhattan, but also outside of Manhattan. Hunts Point has the market, so we would see hopefully see people using that to come into the market for jobs as well. And so we are strongly in favor. We are very excited about the project and hope to see it come to its fruition. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Tashia Lebaras, followed by Monica Bartley.
Good morning. My name is Tasha Lebaras. I'm a peer advocate at the Center for the Independence of the Disabled, New York. We need a much better elevator service that is not misleading. Oftentimes, a sign will be posted that an elevator is not working on the ground floor, but then when I go upstairs, there is no sign by the elevator letting people know the elevator downstairs is not working. If an elevator needs to be repaired, people who need to go up or down the elevator need to know this, not just one direction. Subway rides themselves are difficult for me to maneuver. If I have a seizure, I'm either unaware or confused of what's going on during and after the seizure. We need accessible subways. I have lost my balance and fallen on the train because I had a seizure, but was fortunate enough to have a working elevator by the time I got off my stop. But not everyone is fortunate to have an elevator at their stop, much less an elevator that works. Of course, expanding accessor rides on demand to include people like myself with invisible disabilities would be the best option. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Monica Bartley, followed by Cyrus Monaco.
Good morning. My name is Monica Bartley, community organizer at the Center for Independence of the Disabled, New York. Transportation options for New Yorkers with disabilities don't always follow the kind of immediate and unplanned travel needed for many jobs, for doctor's appointments, for family emergencies, and for everyday life. We're pleased that President Byford is fast-tracking accessibility at 50 new stations, but we've been promised that for years. We welcome the $300 million allocated to subway accessibility, but flexible funding must be available to ensure that accessible subway stations are created despite any delays or cost overruns. In order to make sure we get what federal laws provide, we need to see a reasonable timeline for subway accessibility that includes a clear plan and budget that is enforceable and a line of accountability so we can be confident that these promises will finally be kept. And in addition, I'd also like to ask that the on-demand service be extended, the accessor ride on-demand service, that is. We spoke about this on Monday, and I'd just like to reinforce that request. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Cyrus Monaco, followed by Malan Mehta.
Good morning. Excuse me. My name is Cyrus Monaco. I've been a Staten Island Express bus rider for over 8 years now, and a Brooklyn patron, but well before that. I'm here today to address an issue which has been brought up in the board meetings, along with the borough president, city councilman, and some advocacy groups on Staten Island. It was a huge oversight, in my opinion, within the MTA Express bus redesign. I'm specifically speaking to issues with the new SIM1, old X1 route. Although it's been stated the redesign was rolled out to increase reliability and speed, for me and for many riders, it's done the opposite effect. It's added an additional 30 to 40 minutes on average in travel time. That's including a walk now that I have to do 14 blocks to get the first stop to Staten Island, which is Chambers Street. Just for reference, I'm traveling from Canal. Prior to the redesign, the X1, now the SIM1, used to run along Broadway from 14th Street to Morris. That's about 20 stops that were eliminated. There is no bus service servicing the Soho Tribeca community at this time. In order for me to get home, I have to walk 14 blocks. I tried the train, which is an extra cost. It took forever. When you get to Chambers Street, the lines wrap around the corner with people waiting because the buses don't run on time. They used to run an average of 5 to 7 minutes. I'm now waiting an average of 15 to 25 minutes. By the time the bus gets to its second stop, leaving Manhattan, it is crowded with standing room only. It happened last night. People were standing in the bus well with the bus driver, which is unsafe for many reasons. Again, I used to pick up the bus going back to Staten Island on either the Broadway and White or the Broadway and Grand stop. They were both doable walks, 3 to 4 blocks tops. It's not a bad walk. But 14 blocks is excessive, it's unfair, and it's not sustainable long term. The irony, and I'm wrapping up, the irony is that the SIM-C, which is an off-peak bus that runs between 12 and 3 p.m., makes all the local stops on Broadway, which the previous route had. When ridership isn't it nearly...
Please summarize your remarks.
I will. When ridership is nearly not as heavy as in the evening. My request today is to ask the board just to review the 511 complaints, the MTA surveys, Facebook, social media, and restore the old X1 stops. Again, it's not sustainable long term. We need a bus that services the downtown Soho Tribeca community back to Staten Island. $13 a day.
Ma'am, if you could please summarize your remarks. Thank you.
That's all I ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public speaker is Malin Mehta, followed by Colin Wright.
Good morning, and thanks for giving us a chance to speak. My name is Malin Mehta, and I'm a senior associate at the Regional Plan Association. The MTA this week told us that subway service has stabilized, but there's still a long way to go before the average New Yorker stops leaving home 30 minutes early, just in case. Andy Byford and his team deserve credit for stabilizing the system and developing Fast Forward, which is our ticket out of the transit crisis. RPA believes Fast Forward is credible and doable, the comprehensive plan we need to transform our transit network. And we know that riders can't expect real, tangible change until Fast Forward is actually implemented. Over the past year, the MTA has hired more staff for maintenance and repair, hired a chief customer officer and new station agents. Employees have been hard at work. For example, they have welded 30 miles of new track, fixed 600 miles of signals, and reduced emergency response times by 20%. But we need to go beyond playing catch-up and implement proactive measures like the ones called for in the Fast Forward plan to make the transformative changes needed to create a transit system we need to support a growing economy and population. Fast Forward will cost tens of billions of dollars. It cannot be implemented without new, sustainable revenues. Congestion pricing is the fairest and most effective way to bring the benefits of Fast Forward promises like more elevators, more subway service, transport bus service, and accountability to customers. We need the MTA Board to help build support for Fast Forward and understand and communicate its benefits. We also need elected officials to work together to approve congestion pricing, which will help raise the revenues we need. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Colin Wright, followed by Janice Bartley.
Good morning. My name is Colin Wright with Transit Center's Access Denied campaign. Transit Center calls for full subway station accessibility for people with disabilities, seniors, and all riders. Congratulations and welcome to the new group station managers. These managers will help spot and improve the performance of unsanitary and reliably broken station elevators. Now, New York City Transit must redefine what is an acceptable elevator performance. Today, the agency aims for an elevator to operate 96.5% of the time. And that sounds like an A, but it's not. It means the average elevator will be out of service for nearly 2 weeks every year. I don't think anybody would hold the elevators you use to that same performance standard. With steady effort, Transit finally achieved that standard this spring. But what did that achievement look like? The subway's 250 elevators were collectively out of service over 4,000 times just this spring. That's 4,000 opportunities for a rider in a wheelchair to find a broken elevator and to become stuck or stranded right there in the station. Real people endured countless reroutes and outright canceled trips at 96.5%. I think riders deserve a higher standard. The Fast Forward plan calls for a vast expansion of station elevators, which the governor and legislative leaders must fund. But the same low standards for those elevators won't convince them to do that. Fast Forward is bold, and Transit must hold itself to an equally bold elevator performance standard. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Janice Bartley, followed by Mary Parrison Lavelle. Janice Bartley. All right. Mary Parrison Lavelle. Oh, sorry. Mrs. Bartley, go ahead.
My name is Janice Bartley, and I have been taking Access a ride for about 20 years, and that was just to get here this morning. I joke, but sometimes it really does feel that way with the delays that we have to deal with. I've been late for numerous appointments, missed appointments, and if it's really important to get there, I've learned I have to schedule rides 3 hours in advance to make sure that I will arrive on time. I live in the Bronx, and I've been taken on tour through Queens or Brooklyn on the way to appointments in Manhattan, and just as many times I've been left waiting at my door for a ride that didn't show, or was waiting outside after an appointment. For my return trip home, when you have only one means of transportation to depend on to get you from point A to point B, it can be very frustrating and discouraging if things do not work as they should. It's sad to say, but I sometimes feel like society thinks people with disabilities don't lead productive and meaningful lives, and that is reflected in the services that we receive. I feel that if people could really see that people with disabilities' lives really matter, it would change how people look at the disability community, and more importantly, the way that we are treated. All I want is to be able to get to my job and to my appointments on time like anyone else does. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mary Parrison Lavelle, followed by Murray Bowden.
Good morning. My name is Mary Parrison Lavelle. I'm the chair of Civics United for Railroad Environmental Solutions. Thank you, President Eng, for planning to replace the entire fleet of non-tier locomotives working at Fresh Pond Yard, including the ones the Long Island Railroad sold to New York and Atlantic. Just this week, I spoke with Ed DeMoss about New York State's Volkswagen funding plan that has been released to include $8 million to replace Tier 4 replaced with Tier 4 switches. You can see that on page 2 of your handout. And so the Long Island Railroad can leverage state funding with a Volkswagen application to accomplish the replacement of the entire fleet. We have some great news that within weeks, our first Tier 4 switcher locomotive will be delivered, and this was possible because of waste management and the US EPA, and you can see that on page 3 of your handout. So the MTA RFP 6263 will soon go out to bid for the locomotives. And I have heard that this board say the MTA needs value engineering, culture change, accurate project scoping if need, value capture, more competition, more off-the-shelf purchasing, and decreased costs. To achieve this, it is imperative that this procurement does not repeat what happened in 2013. However, STV's hyper-customized MTA RFP 6263 prefers the same vendor as in 2013 and sets up barriers to competition. President Ng and the MTA board members, please direct Long Island Railroad engineering staff to give the most points in the RFP evaluation matrix to bidders who give you mathematical proof of value-engineered offerings and proof of performance. Bidders must prove they meet documented railroad operating needs, the board's financial needs, and the community needs for the cleanest Tier 4 locomotive. How do you get this proof? Start by asking the bidders for the emissions matrix items on page 4 of your handout.
Ma'am, if you could please wrap up your remarks.
Yes. Also, give bidders the information they need to provide conventional tractive effort calculations, which includes railroad car loads and car weights from the manifests, curves, gradient, and length gradients.
Ma'am, please summarize your remarks.
Yes. Please manage and reward your staff for value engineering and for conducting a lawful, fair, open competition that gives the award to whatever vendor can prove they have the locomotive that best meets the needs of the MTA and the community. Thank you. You could see the rest of my statement in your handout. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Murray Bowden, followed by William Henderson.
We live in a very changing society. England, Europe, Asia, Australia, us, are dealing with circumstances that in history have never been here. We have to learn to live differently, use our resources differently. You've heard a lot about problems that affect the MTA right now. Andy Byford is showing us some ways that we need to change. What's going on in Washington this week is an indication of how vastly people are changing. This is historic in that it has never happened in history before. The way you think about solving problems needs to be done in new ways. The old ways are gone. And some of us at my age have to leave the scene because we can't change. Very difficult to give up. But we have to give up the decision-making to my children's children, my grandchildren and your grandchildren. So please understand, yes, there are problems to be solved, but they have to be solved in new ways. We have to think about them differently and create systems that were never in existence before. You're up to it. I know you are. I wish you well.
Thank you. Our final public speaker this morning is William Henderson.
Good morning. I'm here to speak this morning about ensuring that the MTA has adequate funding to maintain its system and provide the region with a transportation service that it so critically depends upon. In the past 4 decades, and particularly in the last decade, our organization has spent a lot of time considering what the MTA system needs to excel and how to secure the resources needed to meet this objective. As we confront yet another point in time when the system needs demand examination of the finances supporting the MTA, we believe that the path we've advocated practically since the birth of the PCAC, funding that is stable, reliable, and able to adjust to inflation and changing needs of the system, is the appropriate solution today. Instead, the financial choices made by the MTA and by others have too often involved one-shot, Band-Aid solutions that have allowed us to lurch from present difficulties to the next crisis several years down the road. The system that exists today is in large part the product of this lack of a stable funding system. This has led us to where we are today with an MTA system that is heavily burdened, performing below reasonable reasonable standards and expectations, and weighed down by years of deferred repair and modernization. When I arrived at PCAC a little over 14 years ago, one of the first things I worked on was the 2005 Bond Act, which rewarded its backers with $1.5 billion to invest in the MTA. We were happy to see the act approved by voters, but it didn't solve the MTA's resource issues. Neither did a real estate boom, a modest slice of sales taxes, massive borrowing, or the payroll mobility tax. Instead of facing up to what was necessary, we constrained needs assessment and waited for the someday when the system could catch up. The bottom line is the system needs more resources, both in terms of finances and priority in the public realm. Should we execute improvements more smartly and efficiently? Absolutely, but we need to make the necessary commitments now. Leaders out there recognize the needs of the system and are talking about how to meet them. This board also has to deliver this message. This may sometimes involve saying, with all due respect, that funding level won't cut it in the long run to our elected leaders, including the people who named you to this board. It won't be easy, but please do the right thing, and the PCAC, its councils, and our members will be there to back you up. In closing, I wish you good luck and attentive elected officials. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our public comment period for this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis, and let me thank all the members of the public who took the time to speak and share their comments with this board. Let me single out for thanks for his last board meeting, Bill Henderson, who you just heard from, the outgoing executive director of the PCAC. He will be succeeded by a familiar New Yorker, Lisa Dadlian, who I see back there. She will be the new executive director, and I expect this board and the public will be hearing much from her, so welcome. Let's begin with a presentation from President Phil Eng of the Long Island Railroad.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you very much for the opportunity to present all of the great things going on at Long Island Railroad and give an update on Long Island Railroad Forward. It truly is an exciting time at the railroad. And to be able to present to you, Chairman, President, to Managing Director, and the whole MTA Board and to the public is very exciting. One of the things that I've been doing since the very beginning is to make sure that I get out and look at everything we're doing within our agency, looking at it from top to bottom, looking at it from the end of Montauk Point, Orient Point, all the way to New York City, looking at it from Long Island Sound to Atlantic Ocean, and to make sure we investigate everything we're doing and why we're doing it. Also, talking with our customers has been a priority from day one, will remain a priority throughout. Every day, it's going to become a part of how we do business. But also important to that is talking to the employees, because when you know the customer's expectations, you need to understand from the employee perspective, what are the challenges in meeting those expectations? Where can management support? Where can we provide the resources to help us all be successful? And then how can we take action today? So a lot of things going on. Historic investment in Long Island Railroad, $6 billion plus, allowing us to do 100 projects that are going to be transformative, that are going to modernize Long Island Railroad. And not only that, they're going to improve reliability, they're going to improve service. Here's a list of a few of them right now, and they're all types of projects from stations to enhanced capacity through double track, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. These are some of the ones that are completed, the ones that will be finished the rest of after this year. All will provide meaningful benefit and will increase capacity and improve service to our customers. Double track, we just cut the ribbon last week on it. It is a true testament to the men and women of Long Island Railroad, along with industry, working side by side, showing that we can get things done 15 months ahead of schedule. And now the people there are enjoying a much more reliable and much more comfortable ride. In the photo, you can see it's fully ADA compliant, elevators to the platforms. The new building is state-of-the-art. The platforms are heated, so in the winter we'll be able to ensure that the snow is cleared on its own, and that'll allow us to put resources everywhere else. But the other part about the double track that isn't always known is that we are now not only providing more reliable service and improved service when we turned on the switch on last week, but when there's an incident, we can bypass that incident. When there is an incident, we no longer have to call out for buses. We no longer have to shut down the track. We can go around it. A little fact that I'm a little leery of saying, but I'll knock on wood and I'm going to say it. In the last 10 days since we cut over and we turned on the new service, we are running at 93.8% on-time performance for that branch. The PM peak is at 99% since that day. It is something that shows that this is meaningful work. It is providing benefits. Things can still happen, but allows us better time to react. Another key piece is think about the switches. When we had a single track, we had switches at Farmingdale, we had switches at Deer Park, we had switches at Ronkonkoma, and every time in the winter, we need to man those switches. We need to make sure during inclement weather those switches function. When they don't, we need to fix them. Now we don't have to worry about that. We can reallocate resources to other parts of the system. So many benefits, not just to the riders around Ronkonkoma, but to benefits of the whole system. Third track, we broke ground on that recently. This, like double track, alternative procurement, design build, it's showing how we can work with industry and we can partner using the experience and knowledge of our men and women, and we can deliver projects. This was an example of streamlined but community input procurement, one that shows that we can deliver and move projects forward to provide meaningful benefit. That project will also eliminate 7 grade crossings, provide tremendous benefit along that 10-mile corridor from Floral Park to Hicksville. Something else as part of the 100 projects, bridge strikes. We know when a bridge gets hit by an overheight truck, we have to either shut down service, slow down service. In 2017, we had 88 bridge strikes. Under this plan, we'll be replacing 17 bridges, and that will greatly improve our ability to provide service. Here's an example of a bridge that we replaced in October of last year. That bridge was hit, Post Avenue in Westbury, 16 times in 2017. 0 bridge hits since that bridge has been replaced. And that's a key important thing. These are incidents, these are delays that we are now avoiding, that we are minimizing the likely of occurring. That's about everything we're doing through the capital program, through Long Island Railroad Forward. Something else that's dramatically important to us. We know we need reliable and modernized fleet. The M9 cars are in our hands. We're testing some of them right now. They will provide a much more reliable ride. They'll provide a much more comfortable ride, and they'll allow us to be able to provide the service to our customers that they expect. So what are we doing in addition to the capital program? We're balancing that with a new sense of urgency. We're balancing that with attacking the components of our system that are causing the most delays to our customers, that are failing the most frequently, and at the worst locations. And a few months ago, I talked about it, grade crossings, right? Safety delineators, 296 grade crossings. We enhanced the visibility of those by installing delineators. In 2017, we had 417 trains that were delayed as a result of cars accidentally turning onto the grade crossings. We've had 0 cars turning onto the grade crossings as a result of this. It is a tremendous proactive measure that, and I'm proud of the men and women that implemented that in such a fashion that it's done already, is the key. Manholes, we've insulated them. All our infrastructure in those manholes protected against rain, protected against salt and ice. Car cleaning, we've enhanced that. We've hired more car appearance maintainers, and we're seeing that our cars are cleaner. We're enabled now to be able to go in and clean those cars. GPS on our cars will provide more real-time information. That's been immensely important to our customers, and we're doing that. Drainage systems. You know, we live on Long Island. We know that the high water table, right? So wherever we've had drainage issues, where we've had water tables that affect our infrastructure, we're going in, we're tackling it, we're installing new drainage systems, and we're making sure that our tracks are better for that. So here's some of the key points that I'd like to talk about. I talked about switches. You know, early on, before Forward, we identified 10 switches in our system, resulting in 44% of our delays. We've completed 5 of them to date, and I can tell you the reliability and availability is going up. One of the switches I focused on at the beginning, switch 25, over just west of Jamaica. Imagine that, right where all of our lines converge. There was a day where that switch failed twice in a day. We finished those repairs June 26th. We had twice where we had to go in and make an adjustment to the switch. We haven't had any failures since then. It is an amazing aspect, and we're showing how meaningful the work is. PSEG, utility poles, there were 80 identified. When I met with PSEG, we had talked about their schedule and how they're going to do as many as they could this year, and they'll finish them next year. I challenged them. I said, if we provide you the ability to get in, we support you, and provide you the flagging services. Can you accomplish them this year? Can you accomplish them before the end of the season? They said they would try. They've done 71 of 80. We're going to finish them all before the heavy inclement weather comes in. Grade crossings, I talked about that earlier. We saw an increase in the number of accidental cars going onto our system, and we're taking action to avoid that. Threshold plates on our M7, 60% of them are complete. Over 2,000 of these have been done. Knock on wood, we have not had a car door failure on our M7s as a result. It is just another example of us being proactive to ensure that we're doing what we need to do, and we're doing it as soon as possible. Broken rail joints, another key area. And again, at this point, 0 incidents due to broken rails. Vegetation, trees falling. We had so many trees last year that delayed our trains. Not only that, they create hazards for our employees, hazards for the customers. We decided to accelerate that effort. That says 100 miles. I know we're at 117 miles. It is another measure that is proving fruitful and will enhance safety and reliability of our system. The other component to the removal of the trees that's important, it's really also a proactive measure that will address another key area that we encountered last year. That's the slip slide, flat wheels due to the leaves on our tracks. Yes, we are enhancing our wheel truing abilities, but we didn't want to just be more reactive. We wanted to still be proactive. We're looking at 2 new technologies, and we actually are going to implement them for the fall. Right now, our cars have been equipped with higher pressure to remove leaves from the tracks. That is already installed and ready for use. Those cars will also be able to move at a higher speed. Next year, we're going to be even working to move it at a faster speed than that so we could run them during the day. Another technology that we're testing is a laser technology that will be incorporated onto our trains as well. That will remove the pectin from the leaves, and that will be installed for the fall as well. So the other piece about that was the trees. We're clearing the leaves. And then the final component is that we are retraining, and we have enhanced the training to our staff. The engineers are going through this with operations during inclement weather, during these types of slip slide conditions. They know how to do it. We're just refreshing it, and we're making sure that it's a priority. The winter's coming. We know it. We can't control the weather, but there are other things that we can do to mitigate the impacts from that. The snow switch covers. We identified originally there were 20 a year, I had said. We're doing all 60 this year. We have the materials, and they'll be completed before the winter. Third rail heaters, conduit, wiring, it's going in now. We will have the third rail heaters done. I mentioned the threshold plates. Again, these are all proactive measures, and we're doing it right now. So earlier on, I talked about the importance of talking with the customers. We've been doing that. We've enhanced it. We're going to make this a component to every one of our employees. The Meet the Managers program is something that we've started. Every station, we want to go to our customers. We don't want them to have to always come to us. We've been going station by station across the system. It is part of their daily activity, and the feedback we're getting, whether it's constructive criticism or whether it's positive feedback, it's invaluable to us because it helps to keep us going in the right direction. And how do I know that? Long Island Railroad Care is a program we implemented after reviewing accessibility for Long Island Railroad. We reviewed the previous program. It was little used, and it was one where people were feeling that they were not able to reliably get on our trains and get off our trains. We developed CARE, and we created a much more higher visibility. We have ambassadors. We have ushers at our main stations, Jamaica, Atlantic, Penn. 6 times greater usage at the station since we've enhanced this. And I talked about feedback. So much positive feedback from our customers now. They're telling us that the anxiety of their trip is gone. They are feeling that they will be not only helped onto the train, they'll be helped off the train. And this is a testament to our ambassadors, to our ushers, to our conductors. This really takes everybody working together as a team and the management that helped put this together, and working with the groups, the advocacy groups. We created a task force. Another key thing of trying to provide service to our customers and doing that now. Again, taking what we're hearing, turn it into action, because it's important for us to improve service as soon as we can. Something else, through the feedback, hearing about crowded trains at Penn because of the short platforms at Forest Hills, Kew Gardens, 4-car platforms. Everyone's crowding into it. And what happens? We get to those stations, unloading, boarding, it's slowed down. Dwell times are longer because people have to walk up. We said, what can we do? It wasn't in the program. We decided we can do something, and we can do something now. We increased capacity by 50%. We took the experience we had at Shinnecock, and we did the same type of thing. We made it more robust because it's along our main line. And now we are seeing that the cars are less crowded. Our conductors can walk through and collect fares. And we are one other key piece. This is not just about improving the ride for the people at Kew Gardens, Forest Hills. This actually has system-wide benefits. Those 1 to 2 minutes that we lose at each of those stations has an impact across our system. If that train gets late to Jamaica, the connections are late. If that train gets late to Jamaica, the trains following it are late. That ripples across the system. This is a system-wide improvement that is adding benefit not only to the folks there, but across the whole ridership. Stations, we know how important that is to every community. Lynbrook is one that's been talked about for a long time. We sat down, what were we doing? We're going to address the drainage issues that are affecting the viaduct. We're going to address the platform. We're going to replace the waiting area, which so many of our customers spend time in, and we're going to replace the canopy that's leaking. And we're starting that now. We're starting the procurement, and we're going to have work starting in the spring. It's something that we work very closely with the community, with the elected officials in the area, and we said we can wait till the next program, but that's not till 2020 and beyond. Here's a way to provide meaningful improvements to our customers now. Another area, this is a bridge at Lefferts Boulevard. Local community has many businesses that are very important to the character of that. It was a bridge that's in disrepair. It was a bridge that's been talked about to be torn down because it was in such a shape. Sat down with the team. We said, how can we solve this? We could look at new technology to repair bridges from below, and that's what we're doing. We're ordering material with support from the local community and funding provided. We're going to repair that bridge, and we're going to find a way to enable communities to continue to thrive, to continue to build around the Long Island Railroad. So what does that mean? It means we have a lot of work going on. I wish we weren't at the end of a capital program because then they would have more flexibility to do things. But that means we need to take a look at the next capital program. It means we need to be bold with that, and we need to make sure that that program enables us to provide the services that we're saying we're going to provide. And that means that I'm going to take a look at what's important to the employees so they can deliver on those commitments, and that means what's important to the customers because that's their expectation. We've looked at electrification across the system, something that's very important in many ways, yet we have so many areas where we still don't have it. Here's one that has been talked about a long time. It's the Central Branch. It runs from Hicksville, Belmont to Babylon. Not Belmont, Bethpage to Babylon. And it's a diesel connection. In August, when we had the lightning strike and we had the fire at the substation, the mainline branch was shut down. And it took us an hour and a half to be able to round up diesel fleet and crews to be able to start moving people along the southern branch. We're going to electrify that branch. We're going to be able to enable us now, if there's an incident along the main line that takes out every track, if there's an incident along the South Shore that takes out every track, or even during planned opportunities, we're going to be able to start moving people, even with, albeit with delays, we're going to be able to start moving people out of Jamaica or in the westbound direction immediately, because that means any of our coaches, whether it's electric or diesel, can move immediately. The idea is how can we start to address those situations that have been really challenging to handle. We're going to make that a priority for the next program. It's to give us flexibility. It's to give us the ability to respond. It's the ability to provide additional options for maybe inter-branch connections. We're going to take a look at all of our needs across the system. Another area that I believe highly is important to take a look at Port Jeff branch electrification. There's tremendous benefit, just as we did with Ronkonkoma, to take a look at the needs to do there. Electrify, look at where we should double track, and then we could also take a look at how that diesel fleet can be reused. Because something I noticed through this summer, we don't have enough coaches to be able to support our diesel territory. We need to look at that. We need to look at it for not only special events, but we need to look at it for an increasing growth out in the East End. So it's something that we're taking a look at and will be part of our priorities as we build a program that we recommend. We know it's It's exciting time to be at Long Island Railroad. We know how important Long Island Railroad is, not only to the people that use it on a daily basis, but we know how important it is to the communities that live around it. We know how important it is to the whole New York metropolitan area. That's why we hear so much about it. That's why every decision we make is important. We're making the right decisions that will support future generations. We're making the right decisions that will support growth, and we're making the right decisions that communities can be proud of having these stations and the railroad come through their communities. This is what we're looking to do, and that's what we're doing. So really what I wanted to say, this is not just about a list of to-dos. This is about a new sense of urgency. This is about a new way of approaching things. We have a problem. Let's find a solution. Let's find a way to implement it. Let's see if we can implement it sooner rather than later. It really is a new Long Island Railroad. I need to thank everybody, my staff, the employees, the men and women. What they're doing out there, they're working 24/7, and you can see it because we're seeing results. We're seeing positive things come from these. Will incidents occur? We know they will. What we're trying to do is prevent them and mitigate them when they do happen, and we are doing that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, President Eng. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce a new member of our, I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Tessitore.
I will be so quick. I promise. I just want to thank President Eng for the presentation and for acknowledging the employees. This is a really exciting time for the workforce. We're getting pretty good at projects. We embrace the work. They're up for the challenge, and there's a lot of good, positive work ahead of us. With that said, I'd also say that we are going to continue to need some patience from our riders and from the elected leaders on Long Island, where we have to understand doing this kind of work while we are doing a very limited impact to our operations isn't always easy. So the workforce is absolutely ready, and we embrace the work, and we're good to go.
Thanks, President Eng, for a wonderful presentation. I'm hopeful that your philosophy of providing more of a one-seat ride through electrification will also carry forward when East Side Access comes and the service plan for Brooklyn service becomes known, because having the majority of people who had a one-seat ride, or at least across the platform transfer, go up and over to Platform F to continue their I believe most of those folks would probably stay on the train and then just ride down an overcrowded subway line to Lower Manhattan if that was their destination. So I hope you will take a look at the service plan when East Side Access comes.
Thank you, Mr. Albert.
We're looking at all of that, and we're very excited about that, and it is going to be a game changer when East Side Access is done, and we're working very closely with Capital Construction to make sure that we deliver on those commitments. That's a key component to improving reliability and services, making sure we deliver when we say we'll deliver.
Thank you.
Of course. Mr. Glucksman.
Yes, I wanted to second my colleague Andrew's remarks. The one-seat ride is very important, especially for the branches, and I just hope that you could find a way of continuing it. And I like the proposal, which I had been advocating for a long time, to electrify rather the central branch. It's going to really be a big game changer when you have your service diversions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to introduce newest member of our team, our new Chief Safety Officer, Patrick Warren. He'll be overseeing and implementing best safety practices throughout the MTA. There he is right there. And I could have picked them out of any crowd, not even having met him before. He'll oversee emergency management as well, to further integrate and enhance our preparedness. He began his career in the military, and much to Mr. Zuckerman's delight, a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, serving as a colonel in the Army, and eventually Chief of Staff to the Army's Military District of Washington and Joint Force Headquarters, National Capital Region. Following his military career, he served as Executive Director of the Federal Railroad Administration, where he was responsible for driving rail safety improvement within more than 750 railroads. He led programs to combat rail safety challenges including enhanced implementation support for positive train control systems, and has served as Deputy Director, Office of Airports Planning and Programming at the FAA. His distinguished career in the military and federal government, prior safety-related positions, make him uniquely qualified to assume this critical position. So on behalf of the entire MTA Board, welcome aboard. And now, approval of the minutes. Minutes of July's meeting have been distributed and are in the board books. Are there any corrections or omissions? If not, may I have a motion to approve? Second. All in favor? The minutes are approved. Next, report from the Committee on Finance, Mr. Schwartz.
Mr. Acting Chair, the Finance Committee met on Monday and reports the following. There are 2 action items for board approval. The first action item approves the agreement with the New York Power Authority to provide supply of electric energy, capacity, and ancillary services for the MTA and Cognizant service territory. The second action item requests board approval for the filing and acceptance of federal grants for federal fiscal year 2018 and 19. The committee recommends these action items, and I move them.
Is there a second? Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? Oh.
Recusing myself from the NIPA action.
Okay. Record will reflect that. And abstaining. And 1 recusal. I'm sorry? No, I asked. It was supposed to have a question mark behind it. 1 recusal. Motion passes.
Okay. The committee voted to table the action item presented at committee requesting approval for administrative changes to the MTA's advertising policy. Staff will review the action item and present it for discussion at the October meeting. There is 1 non-competitive procurement in the amount of $176,000. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Is there a second? Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? It passes.
There are 18 competitive procurements in the amount of $8.9 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Is there a second? Any comment, questions? Hearing none, are we ready for a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Procurements carried.
There are 7 ratifications in the amount of $12.2 million. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
Is there a second? Any questions or comment? Mr. I'm sorry. Greenberg.
Ira's fine. Anyway, on the emergency order procurements, especially regarding Thales and Siemens, and I forgot the third one. I just wanted to note in these, I didn't because we're short on time, that some of the work being done here should also apply to the commuter railroads, or should be looked at to be applied to the commuter railroads. These are the same people doing PTC, especially in regards to Jamaica, Grand Central, Penn Station, and Brooklyn Flatbush Terminal. As we all know, that we no PTC protection there, and I think some of the work they're doing here might be able to apply to the commuter railroads. I would like to see that bridge made between the commuter railroads and transit, because I think that's a critical safety omission, if you will, in PTC that we should address. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? In that case, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Ratifications pass.
There are 6 real estate action items this month described on pages 80 through 94 of the board book distributed for this meeting. The committee recommends these real estate items, and I move them.
Is there a second? Any comment or question? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining?
This concludes the Finance Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. I chaired the Transit Committee and report the following. There are 2 non-competitive procurements in New York City Transit for $23.1 million on pages 100 through 103 of the board book distributed for the meeting. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them. All in favor?
Opposed? Abstaining? Procurements carry. There are 10 competitive procurements in New York City Transit for $218.4 million on pages 104 through 118 of the board book distributed for the meeting. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them. Is there any comment or question on them? Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The procurements carry. There are 28 ratifications, 4 for New York City Transit, in a total amount of $92.5 million. They are on pages 119 through 127 of the board book, and 24 ratifications for MTA Capital Construction, $47.1 million on pages 128 through 133 of the board book distributed for the meeting. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them. Is there a second? Any comment or question? Hearing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? They carry. And that concludes the report. Metro North Committee, Mr. Zuckerman, who will be making repeated appearances in this section of the agenda.
Well, first, I thank you for the alma mater reference earlier, so thank you. Good morning, Mr. Acting Chairman. On behalf of Dr. Metzger, I report the Metro North Railroad Committee met on Monday, and I report the following. There is one action item for board approval. The action item requests approval to enter into a contract to accept up to $365,000 in a congestion mitigation air quality grant from the New York State Department of Transportation to support connecting services covering October 1st, 2018 through September 30th, 2019. The committee recommends this action item, and I move it.
Second. Is there any question or comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? The action item carries.
There are 3 non-competitive procurements for $79.8 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Is there a second? Second. Any question or comment? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? Procurements carry.
There is one competitive procurement for $368 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Is there a second? Mr. Schwartz seconds. Any question or comment? Hearing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? That carries as well. And because he did so well, Mr. Zuckerman will present the Long Island Railroad Committee report.
Thank you, sir. Thank you again, Mr. Acting Chairman. On behalf of Mr. Pally, the Long Island Railroad Committee met on Monday, and I report the following. There are 37 competitive procurements this month, 1 competitive procurement for Long Island Railroad for $4.3 million, and 36 for MTA Capital Construction for $47.4 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Is there a second? Any question or comment on these? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? The procurements carry.
There are 2 ratifications for MTA Capital Construction for $3.9 million. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
Is there a second? Any question or comment? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? Ratifications carry. Mr. Zuckerman.
Yes, sir.
Because you did so well on those 2, why not take a shot at bridges and tunnels?
Let's see how this one goes. Mr. Acting Chair, on behalf of Mr. Merdler, the Bridges and Tunnels Committee met on Monday, and I report the following. For all the following actions, the committee voted in favor to recommend the procurements. However, a committee quorum was not present. So there are 2 competitive procurements this month for $7.9 million. The members present at the committee recommend these procurements, and I move them.
Is there a second? Second. Any question or comment on them? Hearing none. All those in favor?
That
Opposed?
concludes many. Oh, sorry. Please,
Excuse
apologies.
me.
No, please finish. Let's get all the no's in.
Is that on this?
No. Good. Continue. No.
Opposed? Abstaining? They carry.
That concludes all those reports.
Thank you, Mr. Zuckerman. And now, may I have a motion to convene an executive session to discuss a matter relating to collective bargaining pursuant to Section 105(1)(e) of the New York State Public Officers Law? There's a second. All those in favor? Thank you. We are now in executive session. May I have a motion, excuse me, to go back into public session? Second. All in favor? We are back in public session. The board considered and voted in favor of labor contracts with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the Association of Commuter Rail Employees, Division 37, and Transportation Communications Union following the TWU bargaining patterns. As a reminder, our next board meeting is October 24. May I have a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Come on. That's the way you do it.
So one of the proposals with the subway action plan when it was announced about a year ago was to lengthen C trains. Is my understanding this hasn't happened, or at least I haven't spoken to anyone.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the sentence before that.
One of the proposals in the subway action plan was to lengthen C trains. To the best of my knowledge, that hasn't happened. I'm just curious why that is. It has happened. Are they all of the trains? Only some of the trains?
Well, a couple of things. So we're already taking action with the with one of the trains, which is the R146s. The others will be once we get the full complement of R179s, the new trains that are being constructed by Bombardier. They are coming through. We've made it very clear to Bombardier we must have that full complement of two. To remember the number of units, the full complement by the April date of the tunnel works.
More of an L train shutdown thing than a subway.
I mean, that's what we must have them for, and I've made that very clear to Bombardier. We've got to get the remainder of that order in. We need to hit a one-day beat rate. They're working on it, and progressively, as we get those trains, we will then be able to do something with the lengthening of the C train formations.
I guess my question is for Mr. Byford as well. So there was a lot of talk on Monday about root causes for delays in the operating environment were just still kind of vague. And one of the reasons possibly for those delays that was mentioned was the stop timers, the signal timers. Do you have a better sense? I know you said you were looking into the impact of those changes. Do you have a better sense of when is there going to be a public report that we can look at when that report would be published? And then the second question was L train related. It seems clear from the weekend work that the shutdown's not going to start in the beginning of April. When are we going to get an exact date for that? Why hasn't that been made?
So I'll go in reverse order, if I may. We're finalising the exact date for the work that we need to do under the East River on the tunnel, but the enabling works are well advanced, both on the Manhattan side and on the Brooklyn side. But we're just finalising with the contractor when the actual go live will be in the tunnel, which is of course the catalyst for the closure that we'll have to then do, and the big bus bridge, etc., etc. But that's the date that we're still targeting. We'll firm up on the precise date, and obviously we'll let the customers know, we'll let the public know, and yourselves. With regard to operating environment, there are myriad factors behind operating environment. It's basically anything that's typically within our control, but that delays trains. With the signal timers, we've done a big survey. We've been primarily focused initially on making sure that they are properly signed, in other words, that the actual speed is correct for the signal timer, and that they're properly operating so that the drivers, the operators can approach them with confidence. We're still looking, though, at those that are either unnecessary or where the timings are overly draconian, if you like, because I want to make sure that we keep the safety benefit, but that we can harness any performance benefits that won't impact adversely upon safety. So again, we'll report back on that via the SVP Subways report through the monthly TAC committee.
A question for question for either one of you. Philip Ng today in his LIRR presentation talked about
some of the steps he's done to winterize the system. Now, last week we had the image of the waterfalls in the station. It's still rainy season, and we have winter coming up before too long. How prepared is the system to handle the worst kind of extreme weather?
You mean like another Superstorm Sandy?
Yeah.
Do you want to take that?
Okay. So I'll start at the high level, and I'll bring it down. So we have done, since Superstorm Sandy hit, we have a dedicated division which is set up to deliver a whole suite of programs to make the system more resilient. So among many other things, when you go out of the building, when you turn left just outside Starbucks, you'll see that there are grids on the sidewalk, and where those grids water used to be able to cascade through those grids into the subway. There's now a mechanical mechanism that we can close those grids, and we've got them all over the system. You can close them such that water can't permeate through. So that's one example. We have developed a mechanism by which you can protect station entrances. So if we know something like Superstorm Sandy is coming, you can erect this effectively a protection above the subway entrances. Where we have repaired tunnels under the tubes under the river, under the East River particularly, we have added additional protection so that the tunnels won't flood. What's the point of renovating them only to let that happen again? And typically you get advance notice of these big events. And a whole bunch of other things. Where we have critical infrastructure that's mounted at street level, we've elevated that so that particularly electrical installations aren't vulnerable to flooding. They're deliberately mounted above what you would normally expect in terms of water table. So that's at the macro level. I think we're in a much better place in terms of resiliency. We're doing work down at Coney Island to protect, and on Staten Island for that matter, to protect areas and facilities that are particularly prone to flooding. So I think we're in a much better place. There's still a bit more to do. With what you might call run-of-the-mill events like very, very heavy downpours, I think we still have some work to do. I did see the imagery the other day of water going into the station, so we have been going around sealing leaks on stations in terms of the water the membrane that protects stations from water ingress. But don't forget, sometimes it's because the water is because of the drains might be blocked at street level, or the curb needs to be elevated. And if that water builds up and goes over the curb and goes onto the sidewalk, it is going to cascade down into the station. So we're working with DOT to find those areas that are most vulnerable and to mitigate against them.
These initiatives have been unfolding in the years since Sandy. You can see the results throughout our system, not merely on subways, but also on the commuter rails as well.
Let me just have one more thing. I'm sorry, just one more thing. What I would say is, because we have done so much work on clearing drains, and we provided the stats the other day in terms of literally hundreds of miles of track drains, or hundreds of track drains cleared, and hundreds of miles of the actual drains cleared of debris, which causes the track to flood. In recent very heavy downpours, we've seen way less flooding at track level. And obviously that is catastrophic because it causes the signals to drop out and it causes service to be suspended. So the work of the Subway Action Plan, it's the unsexy stuff. It's not things that you would necessarily see, but it absolutely is doing the right thing because it clears the drains and stops the tracks from blocking.
Hello. Regarding President Ng's presentation, hoping to get your reaction both specifically to the proposal to electrify the Central Branch to help route around disruptions, and then generally what he talked about, the progress report on Long Island Railroad Forward. He points to a lot of statistics that show that things are improving. Meanwhile, a lot of riders say, certainly over the summer, that the service is as bad as they can remember, and some of the numbers bear that out. Is it apparent to you that the railroad is turning a page with some of what the railroad president presented?
Well, in answer to the very last question you posed, yes, it is apparent to the board. And I think Phil Eng's report to us was well received. Look, on the electrification issue, that's something important that we've got to undertake. It's very simple. And by the way, there are other dark spots like that throughout not only Long Island Railroad, but Metro North territory that we've got to pay attention to. That's an important step, and I think Phil is taking the lead there. with respect to all of the other things that he's undertaking to turn around service, actual service in the Long Island Railroad, I think you're beginning to see the fruits of that, but it's going to take some time. Look, it didn't. For example, he showed one of the slides you showed, Phil, was deteriorating platform. It takes years, decades for that to happen. It'll take us a whole lot shorter period of time to turn that around. But there are things like that throughout the system that we're taking very seriously.
Morning, guys. Could Mr. Byford put some chances on getting the subway action, on getting the fast forward plan funded? What do you put the odds at? And what's your approach going to be with elected officials? I've seen your presentation, you had one yesterday. And then maybe Mr. Ferrer has some tips for dealing with the political landscape here.
So I'm not a betting man. The only time I bet in the UK is on the Grand National, the big horse race, and I basically pick a horse by its name or if the jockey's wearing green, because that just happens to be my favorite color. So I think that we need to be a lot more scientific than that in terms of how we go about getting the funding for Fast Forward. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're putting together a comprehensive economic analysis to make the case, the compelling case to which I previously referred, a compelling case that shows the economic benefits, not only to New York City, but to New York State, and I would argue the US actually, of not only doing the work, but then having a properly functioning transit system going forward. So I think that's one stream of activity. A second stream of activity, back to the earlier question, and I made reference to it yesterday in the context of the launch of the group station managers, is I think you've also got to get your basics right. I don't think we will win the argument if we can't even get the basics right of running service. So to me, that's a parallel activity to show that you're a credible management team that's worth investing in, and to show that actually things are getting better across the whole spectrum of what we do in terms of bus and subway and paratrans activity. And then the third stream is an intensifying advocacy campaign, starting with the kind of event that we attended last night, the community conversation we had about Fast Forward, but then meeting with caucus groups, meeting with senators, meeting with assembly members, congressmen and women, meeting with city council, the governor, the mayor, to progressively build up to the seminal vote, which will happen in the spring for the Senate and in June for the City Council. So we have a plan, and we are intending to prevail in those votes. We'll make that compelling case.
Yeah, and I think that's the political answer, too. This is where they converge. People really need to see we need a reliable and sustainable source of funds to get all of these things done. And they all cost money. And they all need to get done now. So I think there's a sense of urgency that is recognized by both levels of government, and I trust that they'll be taking some steps to get that source of funds, reliable and sustainable, to the MTA so that we can get on with our work.
Sorry, if I may, I'll just add one more thing. The other point we'll be making is this is the cost of not taking action. It'll only get harder, and it'll only get more expensive. It'll get harder because the population continues to grow, therefore the pressure increases on ever-aging infrastructure, and it'll definitely get more expensive, as time progresses, because the need gets that much higher. So, although I wouldn't put a percentage on it, Greg, I'd say I'm increasingly confident that we will get the money because everyone I'm talking to gets the need to do it. It's finding the funding sources.
And the only thing I could possibly add to Andy's comment is it doesn't get any cheaper the longer you wait.
Two questions for Andy. One is to follow up on the grates that are elevated. Are those things closed only in a catastrophic storm or in a routine rainstorm?
the former. Those generally, the system generally can cope with sort of light rain and even a regular downpour, as long as drains aren't blocked and the water, say, from the street level doesn't go down into the station, or for that matter, if it's one of our facilities that's blocked. But the device I was talking about is for catastrophic events. So if we know that we're going to be faced with a superstorm Sandy or something of that nature, we send crews out, we get advance notice, we know where they are, they go out and they close them, and we monitor via our storm center.
And I know you talked about this the other day, but in terms of improvements on the subway, what needs to happen until people really start to notice it, and how long is that going to take?
Well, I did speak about this the other day, and I think there is perception and reality. So I absolutely get that right now people don't feel that the subway has material improved. I would argue that I think most people, certainly people I speak to, and I ride the subway every day, say that it's stabilizing, that they're not seeing as many major delays, but they're not yet seeing that turn of the corner. And we would agree with them. We need to truly turn the corner so that people genuinely feel notice a tangible improvement. But there is some element of perception there. I also look at data, and the data doesn't lie. The fact is that we are something like 12% down reduction in major incidents. The mean distance between failure at the rolling stock, so the amount of times trains break down, has improved. The response time to incidents has improved. Fixing the actual incident once we get there has improved. Elevator availability has improved. But I get that it takes time for that to permeate through, for people to truly say, oh, you know what, it's definitely getting better. I remain confident that that will be the case because we're doing the right things.
Any idea how long that takes or will take?
I think already the fact that the data is showing improvement, I think already we can point to a stabilizing of the system. So my view would be that there are, I've certainly customers say to me that they are noticing it's certainly not getting any worse. What we really want is for them to say it's absolutely getting better. So it's hard to put a time frame on that because again we're back to dealing with perceptions rather than necessarily reality. The more that the reality, the data translates into people saying it's getting better, well that's when you'll have your answer.
Hello, also for Mr. Byford. You said yesterday or earlier this week the subway action plan is a living thing. Sounds like the more you do, the more you discover you need to do. But the funding for it is not a living tree that keeps growing money. So how much do you expect you'll need to continue doing the kind of work that you're doing? And related to that, how much of the $836 million has already been spent?
We're on track in terms of the expenditure for the subway action plan, and I'm confident that the money that we now have and the fact that we have both the state contribution and the city contribution, I believe that that's enough to do what the plan set out to do, namely to stabilize the existing system such that we can then push on via fast forward and modernize the system, which is what we all know needs to be done. There will, though, need to be ongoing increased revenue streams. We've made no secret of that. Right now, we're faced with acute financial pressures from an operating expenditure perspective. So we absolutely need to have those new revenue sources, and they've got to be sustained and affordable and adequate. So the fact that we do have now the levy on for-hire vehicles, which will give us a predictable income, that will hugely benefit and help us in terms of sustaining this effort and taking it to the next level.
Excuse me, Mr. Byford, a question for you. Sorry to put you through this again. We were having a system-wide audio problem. Can you just take us through preparations for storm and just repairs and things like that? It just was unusable, so we need it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have a dedicated department that it was specifically set up post Superstorm Sandy to look at all and to take action and to drive through initiatives to tackle all elements of physical upgrades that were needed in order to cope with extreme weather events. So we have, in no particular order, we have designed a mechanism where whereby we can shut off pavement grills, so the grills on the sidewalk that let fresh air permeate down to the station. Obviously, water can get into them, so we now have a mechanism whereby they can be mechanically closed. We have elevated critical electrical infrastructure and built it up from the ground so that it does not get inundated if there's a flood event. We have developed procedures and infrastructure or pieces of equipment to shut off subway stations so that water doesn't pour down into the stations in an extreme weather event. We have been taking action to protect particularly vulnerable infrastructure, such as down at Coney Island, the Coney Island shop. There's been flood protection put in the walls. So there's a whole bunch of things that have been done. The tunnels under the East River, where we've repaired them, we haven't just repaired them like for like. We've also we've installed equipment that with a few hours notice, and typically you get that with a major storm event, that equipment can be deployed to protect the tunnels and to stop them being inundated again, as we saw in Superstorm Sandy. So a lot of physical infrastructure has now been fitted. We've also upgraded our procedures so that we know exactly what to do. If we get that forecast of a major storm event, we go straight into action and take the necessary action to protect the subway.
Back here. This is more for Andy, I suppose. If the money, or Freddie could certainly answer as well, if the money isn't there long term, if it doesn't materialize over the next year or so, then what for you, for the transit system, and for the riding public at that point? Is there the patience for this to continue?
So right now, we're still in the middle of our existing capital program. So right now, nothing in terms of fast forward is being held up. In fact, we are looking at ways to shuffle our existing capital program so that those items that need to get started right now in terms of critical path for fast forward are not held up waiting for the Senate votes and the debate about how to fund fast forward. So we're already doing things in anticipation of getting that large influx of funding. But again, I'm confident that we will get that funding. I suppose the simple answer is if we don't get the funding that we've said that we need in terms of resignaling the subway system, moving towards full accessibility, and upgrading rolling stock and buying new vehicles, well, effectively we're condemning New Yorkers to the status quo, and I don't think anyone wants that. You know, at the end of the day, the fast forward plan isn't about putting up with the status quo. It's not about saying that the existing transit system is adequate for this world city. It is saying we need to transform this system. It can be done, and it can be done within just 10 years.
And that's the answer on the part of the board as well. We can't afford to wait. And it doesn't get cheaper if we kick this down the road.
This is a question for Mr. Ferrer, and if you could answer in Spanish, por favor. Si nos puede hablar sobre las preparaciones que han estado haciendo para las inundaciones en el subway. Ya lo había dicho en inglés, pero si lo puede decir en español, por favor.
What I was just asked is the preparations for flooding in the subway in Spanish. Las inundaciones en el tren subterráneo han sido más frecuentes en el pasado, en el recién pasado. Bajo nuestros planes estamos construyendo mitigaciones en los subways, en los túneles, en los puentes, en las líneas para Metro North y Long Island Railroad. Y necesitamos a la misma vez más fondos. Fondos para construir esas mitigaciones, fondos para mantener nuestro sistema. Thank you for reading that.